I'm the registered dietitian at Vital Choice Health Store. I just want to tell you a little bit about Vital Choice. We are a family-owned health store in North Royalton, Ohio. We've been open since 1998. I can't believe it's been that long. I haven't been there the whole time, but I've been there quite a while. I have our website and our phone number up on the screen. Um, I'm excited to talk tonight about heart health. It is February. February is the month that everyone is thinking about their heart. And hopefully, it's not just about love, though that's important, but it's also about the health of your heart because it is such an important topic. And heart disease is something that affects so many people. So before I get into it, though, I just want to point out a couple features of Zoom. So there is a Q&A and a chat um, tool on your toolbar. There's little icons. One says chat, one says Q&A. You are free to ask any questions through there. You have to type them in. I cannot see you and I cannot hear you, so that's going to be the way if you have questions that you can communicate with me. So I'm happy to answer those. If I don't answer them right away, most likely I'll get to them by the end of the talk. So welcome again. Let's get started and talk about the heart. So heart disease is really referring to a variety of different conditions that affect the heart. So high blood pressure, heart attacks, chest pain, inflammation of the heart, hardening of the arteries, and stroke. An estimated 81 million American adults, which is more than 1 in 3, have one or more types of cardiovascular disease. And it is still the leading cause of death in the United States, England, and Canada. And it is the leading cause of death for both men and women. I think you kind of old school thinking and you know, we didn't realize how much heart disease affected women. And it absolutely does. So it's really important to pay attention to that. Cardiovascular disease claims more lives each year than all forms of cancer and chronic lower respiratory syndrome combined. So this is a big one. This is a big thing that affects our health, and we want to do as much as possible to help prevent it. Or if you already are suffering with heart disease, learn some things that can maybe lower your risk and help to improve. It is one of those things where, like most conditions, most of these chronic diseases that we suffer from in the United States, once you have them, people just think, oh, I have them for life. But very often, by making lifestyle and, you know, dare I say, even diet changes, many of these things can be reversed. So just keep that in mind that just because you have been diagnosed with a condition doesn't mean that's it. And that your risk of death is increased. So there's a lot we can do. Let's first talk about some risk factors. So we know that the older someone gets, and if they have a strong family history, that's a risk factor for heart disease. Things like smoking, obesity, high blood fats like triglycerides and cholesterol, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, a sedentary lifestyle, so not moving a lot, inflammation, and high blood sugar. The good news is that's a lot of risk factors, right? The good thing is only one of those things we can't do anything about. So I still don't have a pill to reverse age. You know, I'll let you all know when I develop that. That will be a great day. But and family history we can't change. So the other things on here, there's a lot that we can do to help improve that. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I want to go through some of these risk factors and how we can improve them and things that we can change, changes we can make to our diet, to our lifestyle, even supplements that you can take to help improve the health of your heart. Let's first talk about cholesterol because that is, I would say, one of the number one things when people come in for supplements at the store or when they're concerned about their heart. They're usually not talking about the heart itself. They're usually coming in and saying, like, what do you have to lower cholesterol? So cholesterol is a waxy fat-like substance. It's not all bad. We do need cholesterol. Cholesterol is important to, it's a building block of the cell membrane. So the outside of a cell that's really important. It's needed to make vitamin D. Cholesterol is also needed to make hormones, things like testosterone and estrogen, and fat dissolving bile acids. That helps a lot with digestion. So we need some, but like most things, there's a limit. Too much of a good thing isn't good anymore, right? So too much cholesterol circulates in the bloodstream and then it starts to deposit, just like you see on the screen. And that builds up as plaque. And what happens then is you've got a more narrow pathway in the blood vessel, and that will restrict blood flow. And if it restricts it so much that it can't get through that results in a heart attack. So we want to keep those vessels and arteries clear and clean. And one way we can do this is to reduce cholesterol, specifically the bad cholesterol. I don't like to villainize things and do this good and bad, but there are better forms of cholesterol than others. And that's important to understand because when you go and get your cholesterol checked, which is something that's part of a regular blood panel, right? You probably all have had this tested. Some doctors will say, oh my gosh, your cholesterol is 230. You've got to go on a medication, it's too high. But what we're finding now in more functional medicine doctors and more, kind of experts in the field will look at what's called your ratio. This is your ratio of good cholesterol to total. So instead of just looking at that overall number, we want to pay attention to how much of it is the HDL, the good, versus the bad. Because if your cholesterol is, 210, but 100 of that is good cholesterol, that's a pretty good ratio. You get your ratio, you can do this, ask for your blood results. If it's usually calculated automatically, you probably will actually see on there ratio and it'll have the number. An optimal ratio, according to the American Heart Association, is 3.5 or lower. So that's what we want to look for. The lower the number in a cholesterol ratio, the better when we're doing it with HDL. So that's something to pay attention to. Another thing that you can ask your doctor for or seek out other testing is looking at the LDL particle size. So this is even more important because now we're finding, and we've known this for a number of years, but LDL particles come in all shapes and sizes. And we're finding that those who have these smaller, denser particles, like on the right of the screen, have a higher risk, a threefold greater risk of having heart disease than those who have the larger types of the larger size particles. So labs have developed special blood tests that measure these types of LDL particles and their sizes. Another, that's just another insight, another piece to the puzzle that you can look at and really say, okay, especially if you're thinking about going on a medication, it might be nice to have some other information first. Something else you can look at, Boston Heart Labs does something called a cholesterol balance test. So what I love about this is it directly measures the major production markers and absorption markers for circulating cholesterol. What does that mean? Well, as a practitioner, we're able to tell, okay, are you someone that is producing too much and there are certain medications that would better serve you, or is it about eating too much, you're absorbing more, and then it's more about diet changes. So that can really tell us a lot and then help treatment and make treatment more specific to what your actual needs are. There is not a one size fits all approach, though very often statins and cholesterol lowering medications are just kind of given regardless of those other factors. So look at your cholesterol ratio, see if you can get deeper testing into particle size and possibly even something like the Boston Heart test. That's especially helpful for someone that hasn't been responding to medications that a doctor has maybe tried. So just because you have a high cholesterol does not mean you're going to have heart disease, first of all, and does not mean that's a risk factor. It's the type of cholesterol, it's the size of these LDL particles. And even still, 50% of people that have heart attacks have normal cholesterol. So, and I've read more recent statistics saying it's even less than that now. More people that are having heart attacks have normal cholesterol. So what else is going on? What else is playing into this risk? Well, inflammation. I talk about inflammation a ton, probably at every single talk I do. I mentioned something about inflammation. And this is another one of those things that we need. Inflammation is part of the immune response. It's a result of an illness, injury. If you hurt your ankle, there's swelling, there's redness, that's inflammatory mediators that are kind of in cytokines that are like rushing to heal and stimulate the immune response. It's a good thing. I think of it like a little campfire. It's warm, it's controlled, it's good. Problem is, we often have, because of our diet, because of our lifestyle, because of stress and many other factors, this chronic inflammation and this silent inflammation. You do not have to have pain to have high inflammation levels. And that's a big myth that I talk a lot about. People, they automatically assume you have to have pain. You don't. Inflammation can be silent. And this chronic inflammation is more like a forest fire. It's destructive, it's out of control, it's constant, and it causes a ton of damage. So inflammation in the heart specifically causes a lot of damage and can actually lead to serious heart problems. It is really something that we need to get a hold of and we need to pay more attention to. There are tests, just like with cholesterol, there are tests, and I don't think, no, I didn't make a slide on this. I forgot to add this in, but I want to mention it. There are two tests that you can ask for or seek out that are going to be good measures of inflammation. One is called CRP. So the letter C like cat, R is in rabbit, and P like Paul. That stands for C-reactive protein. This is a measure of inflammation. There's a highly sensitive version of this CRP that is called HSCRP, highly sensitive CRP. That's a great one to have. And one test is not going to be like the make or break. If you have one test and it's low, it doesn't mean you don't have inflammation, and vice versa. If you have a high level, it doesn't mean there's tons of chronic inflammation. We need multiple tests to really see over time kind of where you're at, but it is something to pay attention to and see if your doctor, they'll know about it. Ask if they can add it on next time you get a cholesterol panel. That's a really good thing to know about and to have. It can be measured. It's a blood test, and it is not just an indicator of heart issues, though this highly sensitive CRP measures the inflammatory protein in blood vessels specifically, but that relates to brain health, that relates to, the state of your body in general. So this is a great test to have just for anyone that's looking to help optimize their health and wellness and prevent chronic diseases. The other thing is it's called apolipoprotein B, or ApoB. B as in boy. This is another inflammatory marker. In 5 major studies, ApoB was shown to be more accurate than looking at LDL cholesterol as an indicator and risk factor for heart disease. It is another one of those inflammatory tests that will indicate chronic, risk factors for disease. So these inflammatory numbers and blood tests can be a great way to pay attention and really analyze your risk. You've got high cholesterol and you have high inflammation, you're someone that really needs to start making some of the changes that we're going to talk about next, so you can improve the health of your heart. Okay. Oh, I want to say one more thing about inflammation. So there are some medications that reduce inflammation. So you may have heard about, just using over the counter, like baby aspirin, thins the blood. It also is a NSAID that addresses inflammation. But the problem is in the process of it addressing inflammation and blocking what's called COX-2, which is this major inflammatory enzyme, it also blocks other beneficial enzymes like COX-1, which is important to protect the stomach lining. That's why one of the risks and side effects of taking something like aspirin long term is stomach ulcers or issues with the stomach. So I don't like to just say, like, do over the counter things or do something like an aspirin regimen or even these smart aspirins, these selective COX-2 inhibitors, which just target, they thought these scientists are brilliant and they developed these medications that just selectively target COX-2 and not COX-1, but those still didn't work. They actually resulted in a higher risk for strokes for people. So be careful with some of these medications that are targeting things like inflammation because they're not going to really modulate across the board. Blocking one thing in the body, as medications often do, results in this cascade effect where there's usually side effects. You've never taken or seen a commercial for a prescription where there wasn't that like person talking really fast all of a sudden and talking about some of these side effects. You're at higher risk for heart disease and stroke and even death, like that goes on and on. So just be careful with that. There are other ways that you can really reduce inflammation through lifestyle, and we're going to get to those in just a minute. I think it's important to mention calcium whenever we're talking about heart. And this in particular is something for women to pay attention to because pretty much as soon as we hit 40 and start having to pay attention more to bone health, we're put on calcium. And there's no attention paid to what kind of calcium, what form of it, what's with it. So recently published studies are revealing that taking these calcium pills, because we're put on, 1,000 milligrams or 1,200 milligrams of calcium, that calcium doesn't just go into the bone. It also deposits in the inside of our arteries. So when I showed you that picture before with the plaque deposit, calciums can do the same thing. There's something called arterial calcification. It's calcium deposited on arteries that hardens them, that creates those narrow pathways, and is actually very, very dangerous. So taking tons of calcium is actually not great. We need something to help the calcium go, direct it towards the bones rather than just free for all, it going all over the place, including the arteries. So are calcium supplements safe? Well, of course, some people have osteoporosis, osteopenia, have a high need to take care of their bones. They're at risk for falls and bone issues, and they should be taking a product. But a couple things to look for. Look for something that's a food form. We know things that are closer to food tend to absorb better and don't have the kind of side effects usually, and one of them being major stomach issues that other forms have. So I like a whole food form, like an algae form. Vital Choice actually makes a product that's an algae-based calcium that is a blend with other things other supportive nutrients that I'll talk about. So it's a whole food calcium or a form called hydroxyapatite, which is a mouthful, but that's a better form than a carbonate or citrate, which is basically rock and chalk. And we are not meant to eat rocks and chalk and get much out of them. So that's why those types of calciums just I picked on one before, the caltrate, which is either carbonate or usually it's a citrate, just not that well absorbed. So now we've got a calcium that's not absorbing well, that's going all over the place and could be increasing your risk for heart issues. You never want to take calcium by itself. Yes, vitamin D is important and magnesium helps the absorption, but there's one more nutrient that I like to see called vitamin K2. You're going to start seeing this if you haven't already, combined with vitamin D and added to a lot of these bone formulas because it acts like a little traffic cop. It helps the calcium go into the bone rather than settling in the arteries and in other places. So that's an important one. Vitamin K2, somewhere upwards of 45 micrograms. I like to see closer to 90 in a bone formula, but just pay attention. More is not better. You don't have to take thousands of milligrams of calcium, especially if you don't need it. So I know that was a little bit of a digressing away, but this is an important conversation to have, especially for women that are concerned about their bones and their heart. So just pay attention to the calcium that you're taking. So what else can we do? There's 7 lifestyle changes for cardiovascular support that I've come up with that are really maybe not that surprising to you, but really important, and we're probably not doing as much as we can. And as a dietitian, for me, there is no more destructive of a food category than sugars. We don't need any. We don't need any sugar in the diet. We need carbohydrates to an extent, but we do not need sugars in the forms that we are typically eating them in. Think about going to the grocery store and think about these aisles. We have an entire aisle just of potato chips. Then you go over and there's crackers and cookies. And then you go over to the next one and it's desserts. And then you go over and it's frozen packaged foods and cereals and granola bars. These are all processed foods. They get marketed as healthy, but they are loaded with sweeteners like sugar and a ton of other empty calories. So talking about inflammation, sugar drastically increases inflammation in the body, and it increases blood sugar, and it increases oxidative stress. It suppresses the immune system. So just be careful and think about any amount you're having as extra instead of just the typical kind of American diet where we're just used to everything being sweetened. I'll really quick story, but it was eye-opening for me, even with what I do for a living. I went on a complete sugar-free, not diet sugars, but like no sweetened foods at all. And I did more of like a high fat, like a ketogenic diet. And at one point, I was eating some raw macadamia nuts, and I put them down. I started looking at the container. I was looking at the ingredients. I got to a point where I actually called the company because I was convinced that there was sugar added. And that's not what it was. I had just become so sensitive to that taste that I was tasting the natural sweetness. There was nothing added, just of the nut itself. And it just reiterated this point that we get so used to these sweet flavors. I have a lot of clients that come from Europe and other countries, and they say, like, I came here and I gained 40 pounds and I'm not doing anything different, but everything tastes so sweet. Your bread, your pasta sauce, everything has sugar in it, and it does. And these food companies know that because that makes your brain turn on certain happy chemicals, and that causes us to eat more. So be advocates for your own health. Read labels. There are many places where you don't realize that you are getting a ton of sugar. And like I said, yogurts and cereals, sports drinks, most of us do not need to be drinking a Gatorade or a sports drink unless you're playing football for 2 to 4 hours. You probably don't need an electrolyte replacement, especially one that has a ton of sugar in it. If you're a marathon runner, then you need one. But most of us don't need anything like that. So just pay attention to that. And then on the opposite, increase your fiber, especially soluble fiber. This is in our whole grains. This is in beans and legumes. This is in vegetables. 5 to 10 grams or more of soluble fiber. So total, we should be having like 30 grams of fiber, 30, 35 grams. But of that, we want a good portion to be soluble fiber. That actually absorbs into the body to get rid of the cholesterol. So oat bran is probably something many people are aware of, or oatmeal that has good amounts of soluble fiber. So that is a great thing to have, and try not to add sweetener to it. Try to just use some berries and some walnuts, and chia seeds are another great thing to increase fiber that you could add to that oatmeal, some cinnamon powder, and that would be a better thing than getting something that's got a lot of sweetness to it. Increasing healthy fats. Healthy fats are huge for helping the heart and also reducing inflammation. So olive oil, right? That's something we know is a great fat. Avocados and avocado oil, which you can get in every grocery store pretty much these days. That's another one that's really great. And it doesn't have a strong flavor. So you can use avocado oil in like higher heat dishes, with olive oil is better, for lower heat or making salad dressings or drizzling it over vegetables, that kind of a thing. Walnuts, almonds, flax seeds, these are all rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which are a critical fat for the heart. And our bodies can't make omega-3s. So we either have to eat them or we've got to supplement with them. And, to really eat enough, you should be eating fish like wild salmon, wild sardines 3 times a week, not tilapia, not really orange roughy and some of the white fish. And we're coming into that season where it's like just fish fries, and people think, oh, I'm eating fish. It's so good for me. That's not the kind of fish, and that's not the kind of fats that are helping. Those are actually driving up inflammation. The wild fish, wild Alaskan salmon and wild sardines, and even wild herring and mackerel, those are the fish that are really important for our heart, and our brain while we're at it. The other thing we should be paying attention to is our spices, not necessarily that have to be spicy, meaning there's heat there, but just adding things like herbs and things in our spice cabinet. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had some spices in my cabinet for years and years on end, and I just recently had to kind of purge a lot of things, and I replaced almost my entire spice cabinet, and it was like $20 or so to do this. And, I picked like all of my favorites. I had the jars already. We actually sell organic spices at the store bulk. So it was way cheaper than getting everything already jarred. So I did that, and the difference in flavor is amazing. But what's also important is that spices and herbs don't just add flavor, they also add antioxidants and anti inflammatory components. Turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, rosemary, oregano, garlic. These are all amazing. Cilantro, like when we regularly add these in, they can do a lot for our health. Ideally, we grow up eating a variety of these spices. Not so much salt, but the other herbs and spices. If you already have a chronic condition, then we can talk about maybe doing a more concentrated version of something like turmeric in a pill. And I'm going to talk about some supplements in a minute that are especially helpful, and good quality products. But don't forget about the spices and utilizing the power that those have. Really, the best diet, one of the most studied, is the Mediterranean diet. And it's very different than our pyramid, and certainly very different from our pyramid what we're actually eating, kind of the standard American diet. So the bottom is to be physically active every day, base each meal around vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. So olive oil, nuts, legumes, seeds. Every plate that you have, half of it should be full of non-starchy vegetables, whether it's salad greens or roasted Brussels sprouts and asparagus and bell peppers and onions and whatever. Try to just visualize that, and that will bump you up to at least 4 or 5 servings of veggies a day, which is what we should be eating. We eat a lot more animal protein, a lot more cheese and dairy in this country, and those are all very inflammatory. We also do a lot of, like I mentioned before, processed carbs and refined and white breads. And take a look at the label on if you have a bread, take a look at the ingredients. And are you seeing caramel color? Are you seeing, refined wheat? And is there 1 gram or less of fiber in it? That's not a good whole grain type product. You want to look for something that's either a sprouted whole grain or something like, there's a brand called Dave's Killer, like whole grain bread. That's at least a better, and they sell that everywhere. I've even seen that at Target. That's a better bread that at least is clean. It doesn't have a lot of the preservatives and junk. So seafood, especially those wild fish that I mentioned, should be eaten regularly every week. and certainly water should be the main drink. So that's just something to think about. Other lifestyle changes, if you're a smoker, as if there isn't enough reasons to quit. It costs a ton of money. It increases your risk of cancer. It goes on and on. It increases your risk of stroke, increases your risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. It also increases your risk of heart disease. And if you quit, it lowers your, or if you smoke, it lowers your good cholesterol and it negates some of the beneficial effects. And if you quit, it could actually increase your HDL by as much as 10%. So just quitting alone is huge, not to mention all of the inflammatory and oxidative stress it causes. Managing your weight is also important, especially the weight that's kind of in the midsection. That seems to be the hips and thighs don't tend to be as big of a risk factor as someone that has more of a belly. That abdominal fat is really damaging to the organs and kind of like encases them and doesn't allow them to work as well. There have been studies showing for every couple pounds you lose, if you're overweight, your good cholesterol goes up, your inflammation goes down. It makes it easier to move as well, and it helps with just overall heart health. So managing weight is an important, especially if you've got a lot of weight in the midsection. And then, yes, I'm saying the E word, exercise. I'm not just talking about being active around the house. I'm talking about walking, swimming. If you've got bad knees and a bad back, there are chair workouts that you can look up for free where you're working your arms out. Whatever the excuse is, we need to be moving more. We are at a point where I used to talk about, like, a few years ago, I would say, we've got drive-throughs, we don't even have to get out of our car. Now we don't even have to leave our house. We can have groceries delivered. We can have food, DoorDash come to our home. We don't have to move at all. And it's convenient, but it's so bad because we are meant to move and we get complacent and we get sedentary, and that affects everything. Then the less you move, the less you want to move. Then you start getting aches and pains because your joints aren't staying mobile. We've got to do more to get your heart rate up and work so that you're out of breath. It's difficult to have a conversation, as long as it's clear with your doctor. Aerobic exercise, 150 minutes a week is absolutely critical for, again, the heart and the brain and the whole body. So try to get that in as much as you can. And if you can't if that's too much to think about, if thinking about an hour a day or 30 minutes a day is too much, I will challenge you to try to do 5 minutes of something. Do 5 minutes of some sort of fitness, even if it's sitting in a chair and just working your arms out, something to get your heart rate up on a commercial break. Stand up and march in place until the show comes back on. Anything like that is a good start. And very often, once you get up and start moving, you want to keep doing more. So that's an important thing. I'll stop talking about exercise, I promise. But if we could bottle up all the benefits exercise has to offer and sell that would be worth billions of dollars, honestly. That would be the most important supplement that ever existed. But speaking of supplements, what are some great ones that we can do? Well, we talked about inflammation being such a high risk factor. There are some amazing supplements for inflammation. Change your diet and then think about adding in a supplement. The supplement on the left is Zyclamend. This is a combination of those spices that I mentioned. So turmeric, rosemary, oregano, ginger. It's got green tea in it. It's got just a whole blend of herbs that together are a much more potent anti-inflammatory effect and inflammation modulating effect than taking those things separately. And it is actually been shown to decrease CRP in people's levels. So that's one of those tests I told you that you can get to look at inflammation in the body. And this particular supplement, Zyclamend, is one that can actually help to reduce those levels. So it's also good. We have a lot of people with joint pain, arthritis type issues that will take Zyclamend, and really like it. And that's one, to be honest, both of these supplements on this page, regardless of if someone has an issue or not, these are great, I guess like preventative supplements and optimizing health supplements. Zyflamen because of that anti-inflammatory effect, and then Ultimate Omega, which is an omega-3 fatty acid supplement that is sourced from fish like wild anchovies and sardines and good fish. If you're getting a fish oil, you want to know what fish it's coming from. That's really important. If it doesn't say, there's probably a better brand out there. You also want a fish oil to be in a triglyceride form. And this image is a little blurry, but it says right towards the bottom, natural triglyceride form. That is important because that is a closer form to eating fish than a more processed pill. Is it a little more pricey? Yes, but you get what you pay for and you absorb it at a much higher level. You're also getting a more concentrated amount in a product like Ultimate Omega versus a 500 milligram supplement that really isn't giving you enough. So I love Nordic Naturals products for fish oils. New Chapter also makes a great fish oil called Omega, which is a wild Alaskan salmon oil. That's a great one too. It comes in a soft gel. They make tiny pills if you have trouble swallowing, because fish oils can be a little bit larger. My kids actually bite into these. They're kind of odd, but they love the way they taste. To me, it has a fishy taste. I prefer to just swallow it than bite into it. But to each their own, and that's a really good one. So I should also mention omega-3s reduce triglycerides. So you need higher amounts, something like closer to this Ultimate Omega dose where you're taking 2 or 3 pills a day, but those will also reduce triglycerides, which is another type of blood fat. And these can also improve the cholesterol ratio. So lots of reasons to think about doing these types of supplements. What about cholesterol? Let's talk about targeting cholesterol for a minute. There are a couple ways to go. So statins, which I mentioned earlier, actually inhibit production of cholesterol in the liver, which come with it some negative side effects. One of the main ones being leg pain or leg cramping or muscle fatigue. And this is something that, they're just known for. And some people have it so severe they cannot take statins and they're very sensitive. If you are one of those people, or if you just prefer to start with something that's not having that much of a blocking effect, then the Vital Choice Cholesterol Support is a great product. It's a combination of different ingredients like polycosanol and plant sterols, which have to block dietary cholesterol, and Google, which helps with oxidation of bad cholesterol. Got a little oat bran, which I mentioned fiber being really important. Garlic, grapeseed is great for antioxidant levels and even blood pressure. There are some studies that are looking at grapeseed for blood pressure. But the main star of that particular supplement is polycosanol, which is a mixture of fatty alcohols that are either derived from beeswax or sugarcane. And they work to lower cholesterol by blocking, without completely inhibiting, formation of cholesterol. So there's a small amount in here. It's a 2 or 3 a day. If your cholesterol is pretty high, your doctor's on you, you probably want to do the 3 a day. And we've had great feedback on it. So I love that product. If you're someone who wants to do something that, I don't necessarily want to say it's stronger, but in a way it's got probably more potent effects to it. Something like the Jarrow red yeast rice formula. Red yeast rice is like a natural statin. So what I like is they're putting in CoQ10, which helps to curb the side effect of the muscle fatigue and muscle cramping. The reason statins do that is they block the body's creation of CoQ10. So if you add some in with something that's got some statin effects to it, it really helps to curb that effect. So those are both great options. And we have, people see right in their numbers. This isn't something that it's like, I kind of think it's working. We'll say, take it consistently. until your next blood test and see. And usually there's an improvement enough that someone can stay off medication and avoid some of those detrimental side effects. What about blood pressure? There's a lot of stuff out there for blood pressure as well. So I'm going to break down some ingredients and then I'll show you some specific products that I like. So peptides, these typically come from fish. There's a peptide supplement that we have that comes from a bonito fish, which is in the tuna family. And there are studies that indicate that this type of peptide helps, almost acts like an ACE inhibitor without the side effects that accompany the drugs that are ACE inhibitors, like the nighttime coughing and cramping and all sorts of problems. So I like peptides. I find that they're useful, especially if someone has more of like a hereditary reason for having high blood pressure. What I tend to see more of is a use for magnesium, which is a mineral that we all need, and magnesium helps with calming, it helps with sleep, it helps with um, going to the bathroom more. It's great for muscle spasms. It does a lot, and it's also been shown to decrease blood pressure. Um, and one of the suspected reasons why is because a lot of people that have high blood pressure are triggered because of anxiousness or stress. If you have white coat syndrome, you're someone that says, my blood pressure is normal, and then I get in the doctor's office and it shoots up. Something like magnesium would be really beneficial because it helps to reduce that stress effect, and your levels won't shoot up every time there's even a moderately stressful event for you. So magnesium is a wonderful ingredient. Hawthorn is a great like overall heart herb that you'll see in a lot of formulas. It's thought to lower blood pressure but also strengthen the heart muscle, which is really important. Um, has a mild diuretic effect. It acts as both a natural calcium channel blocker and an ACE inhibitor, so that's another great one to have in a blood pressure formula. An herb called Coleus fuscoli, which has been shown to lower blood pressure by increasing CAMP, which is a relaxing of the arteries. It's a component that helps to relax arteries in the body. So we want that. That's a good thing. And then I mentioned grapeseed earlier, which is a really high antioxidant. It is something that can really promote blood vessel strength and help to protect. Anytime our cells are damaged, which they are over time, adding antioxidants, which is why we promote eating fruits and vegetables mainly, because and spices and nuts and all of those things are good sources of antioxidants. But something like grapeseed can be not only strengthening and helping protect against oxidative stress, but it can show improvement in both the systolic and diastolic blood pressure. So that's another one where we want to see it in a formula. So these are a couple products. The Peptase, which is on the right, this is a formula that I like, again, for someone that has hereditary type high blood pressure. It can be really helpful for that. And we don't have a ton of like we do 60-day guarantee at the store, so we can see a lot of the products that come back because people are having side effects, and we don't tend to see any sort of a lot of issues with something like Peptase. You can take, usually someone will start with maybe 1 or 2, but you could take more than that just depending on the level that you need. And then there's blood pressure support, which is a Vital Choice product. That's one that combines a lot of those ingredients I just mentioned. So it's got magnesium, it's got hawthorn, and it's got the Coleus fuscoli in it, as well as hops, which is another thing that helps with stress. So if you're someone that you think maybe more stress related high blood pressure, or you're just not sure, that blood pressure support is a great formula to start with. And you can start with just 2 a day, and then the full dose is considered 3 a day, but not everyone needs that much. So that's a great product. I always suggest for people to take that in the evening because of that magnesium in there. It helps with calming both physically and mentally, so it helps a little bit with sleep and relaxation. So that's a nice one to try. So I'm happy to entertain if they've left some time. If anyone has questions, feel free to use that chat box or use the Q&A feature to ask some questions. The big takeaways are know your risk factors. Don't be afraid to have a conversation with your doctor or ask them, do you mind taking, testing HSCRP, throwing it on? It's another box they have to check. That's about it. It's typically, especially if you have high cholesterol or have an issue, it's typically covered by insurance. You could ask for an LDL particle test or that ApoB. Something like the Boston Heart test usually is a something separate that they'll have to send out. But it's worth asking about and knowing where your risks are and really if the medications you're being prescribed are the right ones for you by knowing more about your health. Modify your diet. I mean, there's such power in food. I wouldn't have a career in it if it didn't make a difference. And, it's so satisfying on a regular basis to have someone have such improvements in their health just by changing what they're eating. So pay attention to the sugars in your diet and the processed foods. Think about adding in more good fats, more olive oils, more wild fish. If you're not doing that, add in a supplement. That's going to be important. Be smart about calcium supplements. We don't want to just take a ton. And speaking of, Tums are calcium carbonate. So if you've got a lot of acid reflux and you're living off Tums, that can be affecting your arteries as well. You've got to get moving more and think about some of those supplements that address inflammation, blood pressure, cholesterol, whatever your issue is. Okay, I see some questions coming in. Someone's asking, where can you get the Boston Heart Cholesterol Balance Test? Depending on your doctor, they should be able to order that. So you could actually ask your doctor. There probably are also independent labs that do that, and I can look after and get back to you to see if there are like local places. But functional medicine centers, Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. I work at a place called Kemper Cognitive Wellness. We do those kinds of testing. There's Inspire Wellness in Beechwood. Those kinds of functional medicine doctors are more likely to order those types of tests than just a traditional doctor would. Someone's asking, can I take blood pressure support, the beets supplement? So beets, I didn't mention beets. I should have mentioned beets. So thank you for this question. Beets have they're a great source of nitrates, which help with nitric oxide production, which has a vasodilating effect. So there are tons and tons and tons of beet supplements popping up. We got in these beet gummies that taste delicious and they have like 500 milligrams of beets in them. Those are great for blood pressure as well. So someone's asking, can I take the blood pressure support, the beet supplement, and blood pressure medication all at the same time? I never am comfortable saying, yes, if it's a medication. I think you would want to probably talk to a pharmacist, make sure that there are no contraindications before you take that, because sometimes it's too much of a good thing and your levels could drop too much. The beets are probably fine because that's more of a food, but blood pressure support has some herbals in there and those can be strong and those can be effective. But combined with a medication, especially if it's working in the same way, you'd want to avoid taking those at the same time. So just you could ask your doctor, but we find that pharmacists tend to know more about supplements and they probably need to know the specifics that are in there. So you could ask them, magnesium would be fine, but the herbals in there, the coleus verscoli, the hops, some of the other herbs, I'm just not sure about. So you'd want to check with more of an expert on that. Okay. Another question. I'm gonna stop my screen share real quick. We're gonna look at these other questions. Okay. What are some good sources of fiber and soluble fiber? So you can do supplemental fiber, like powdered fiber, but I try to have people get it in the diet. So oatmeal, oat bran, doing any sort of whole grain. So instead of white bread, instead of white pasta, doing a whole grain brown rice pasta or a whole grain bread. Those are going to give you more fiber. Beans, black beans, lentils, peas, those are all great sources of soluble fiber. And of course, your roughage, your vegetables. So I try to encourage people to get like 5 servings, which I know always sounds like a lot, but that's what it takes to really get a lot of the benefit out of those veggies and to really transform your health. We're looking to make big improvements. So I think it's important to eat enough. You can't just eat that little, serving of mixed vegetables that so many people do like at night or with dinner rather. Um, so those are some of the best sources of fiber in the diet. Okay. Someone's asking about types of cinnamon, Ceylon over cassia. Yeah. So if you're using the spice like cinnamon, there's different types, and Ceylon, there's actually a toxin in cinnamon that if you consume too much of the wrong types can be bad for the liver, believe it or not. And especially if you're considering a cinnamon supplement, Ceylon seems to be the most effective as far as having the good benefit, the antioxidant levels, but it's lowest in that coumarin, that toxin that's in cinnamon. So if you're going to be using it therapeutically and doing high amounts, do Ceylon. I will say though, Ceylon does not taste as strong. Some people like that. I was surprised by that the first time I had Ceylon cinnamon because I thought that it was going to be stronger, and it tasted more mild. So I find that I'm adding a little bit more, which is okay. So that's, yeah, I do like Ceylon. Okay, what else here? What about berberine? Would that be beneficial for cholesterol, blood pressure, inflammation, and blood sugar? Yeah, berberine is another supplement that really seems to be becoming more and more popular. And when we started getting them in, we're having discussions over like, where should we put these? So we have them in blood sugar, but they're also in other sections because berberine seems to have multiple effects. There is some evidence suggesting that berberine can lower cholesterol, for sure blood sugar, which is another risk factor. If you have high blood sugar, you have higher inflammation and you're at higher risk for heart disease. So managing blood sugar is really important, and that berberine seems to help improve lipid levels and manage blood sugar. So it's also a high antioxidant, so that's a nice one to try. And you just have to be consistent with these things. They're not medications, so they don't have the same level of side effects, but they don't have a blocking effect instantly. So you've got to be consistent and take them for a little while for them to really make a big difference. All right, any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for attending. I'm just going to put up one more slide here. That is a quote from Ben Franklin: "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." And I like to end with that because we need to focus on getting to things before they become major issues. So if we made these preventative steps versus waiting till we had a problem, it would be a much greater, we'd have to be a much certainly more healthful country, because we're in the mentality of sick care. Wait until something's wrong, go to the doctor, get a pill, and move on. That's not working for us. We're having these chronic preventable deaths from these diseases that we can do stuff about. So a lot of our top causes of death, like heart disease, can be prevented if we just take some action. Okay, see some more questions. What days am I in the store? I'm typically in the store on Saturdays. Just depends on the week. My kids have competitive sports, and so sometimes that affects my weekend availability, but I try to be there on Saturdays. I will not be there this upcoming Saturday, but I will be at the one after that. So, and if you have, we also have a nutrition specialist there, Jen. She's amazing. She is a wealth of knowledge. Denise and Dan have been there forever, and Deb, like that's one of the things we pride ourselves on at the store is having a well-educated staff. And if you're talking to someone and they don't know the answer, they will grab one of us that does. So I'm confident that whoever you talk to at the store, they'll be able to get you the answers that you're looking for. All right, everyone, enjoy your evening. Thank you for spending some of it with me, and I hope you go eat some veggies, stay hydrated, and think about doing things for inflammation. Take care.